Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of Lions Do Not Bow, a new show my dad and I started, where we're going to be discussing the Bible, politics, history, trends, current events, and a variety of different topics. Last time we talked about kind of who my dad is, what his story is, what our family has gone through, what he went through. And today we're going to be continuing that story. Specifically, he's going to be talking about his testimony, what happened after he left communism, then left Greece, then left from Greece to Canada, and what happened after he immigrated to Canada. And we're going to be walking through his testimony. I'm going to be asking him some questions, and hopefully he'll be able to explain and articulate why he does what he does and who he is. And I want to paint a picture for all of you of the person that he is and how Jesus Christ transformed his life. So without further ado, we're going to start. And before that, I want to discuss actually the name of the show and why it's called Lions Do Not Bow. So we'll begin. And we picked the name Lions Do Not Bow, and I'll get my dad to interject and explain exactly why. But his book is also called Lions Do Not Bow, and I'll get him to explain why that name.
Well, good to see you, Nathaniel, again. It's a joy that we can do this together. I mean, you are in a land of the free and the home of the brave, and I am truly feel more and more like a repetition of history came our way. We're truly living behind the Iron Curtain in China right now. So I got mixed feelings. Part of me looks at you there and says, maybe I should move to the land of the free and the home of the brave. But of
I
course,
would say to that, I would say, I was talking with somebody actually about this earlier because a lot of Canadians do maybe feel that way. However, I would say that America is not very far behind from Canada. And yeah, there's a decent, good administration right now, but that can change just like the entire world changed in one day, which we saw in 2020. The entire nation of America can change in one day after this administration is done. And if the American people pick another, a Democrat in the next election, all of that can be undone. And, God forbid, hopefully that doesn't happen. But I don't see America actually very far behind from Canada. I would say 5 years tops from the direction Canada is heading. So it feels a little bit freer, but not by much, because we're heading in the exact same direction.
actually, if you remember, the prophet that came from England said that to us, and he said to me and my wife, your mom, that if we are thinking of moving to United States, we should be aware that the same demons, if you will, the Jezebels, will be hunting us there as well. In other words, there's no escape. You cannot run anymore. You have to face the enemy. I call it the Polish way, Artur Pawlowski style, head-on collision. So you were talking about
And
Lions.
sorry, one thing to that, actually, the reason for that is because, to put it politely, you're a loud mouth. You're the person who's kind of a barometer. I call you a barometer. And if you study history and you understand that totalitarian regimes act in a very similar way, it's like they're all using the same playbook. History just repeats itself. You know that pastors, or people that are very bold and very rooted in their religious beliefs, are usually the people that are targeted first. It's usually the loud people. It's the tip of the spear, and those people can gauge if a nation is truly free. And because you're loud and because you are very in your face, actually people should look to people like you, and to you specifically, to gauge whether or not a country is actually free. Because if you can't get away with saying certain things, then that means you don't have freedom of speech. Because if they came after you, they'll come after everyone else. Like the famous saying goes, first they came after the socialists, and they came, you know, the first they came after the Jews, then they came after the socialists, and then they came after me. That's always how it goes. So there's always those people that you can look to that will gauge whether or not a nation is free, and you're a person like that. And from history, we should learn so that it does not repeat. However, to get back to the point, we called this show Lions Do Not Bow, and you named your book Lions Do Not Bow for a specific reason.
Well, just before I go there, I want to add it's not just the clergy that are in trouble, also the whistleblowers. You have to understand anyone that dares to speak the truth, because totalitarian regime, dictatorship, a police state, any form of a regime wants to control people and is built on lies. It's like a house of cards, lie on top of lie, manipulation, disinformation, misinformation, propaganda. And when someone like me or you or whistleblower or anyone comes with an information that is true, well, the whole house of cards crumbles, and that's what they are terrified of. That, and I mean, it's nothing new. We have seen this for thousands of years. Every tyrant, every dictator is afraid of those that are preaching the truth. But why lions do not bow? I mean, you were there with me when we went to Africa. Everything started with us going there. And there is this famous saying, I really like it, that goes like this: you either fall in love with, Africa, or you hate it. So either you will love it or hate it. And as you know, I fall in love with Africa, with African people. It's just amazing. And during the time that we went together, at that time we were supporting a local pastor over there. Was kicked out from his church for simply doing his job, preaching the gospel. And we've decided to support this man, and he started a little church, then a little bit bigger church, and as you remember, now he has one of the biggest churches in Kenya. But during those trips to Africa, we were able to observe God's creation, and he speaks to me quite often by me looking at things, by seeing things, and then I would have this download. God would speak to me when I'm looking.
Which is a very biblical that's a very biblical statement. I mean, I believe it says in Romans that all of creation screams of his existence, of his presence.
So when we were there, after the missions, after we were able to preach and do, a mission trip there, we had few days in the savannah. We were able to observe nature, and I'll never forget those moments when we were observing the lions. I mean, lion to me is a totally different league of an animal. It's like the eagle. There's something more to it. It's majestic, it's amazing, it's powerful. And we call them the kings, right? The eagle is the king of the skies, and lion is the king of the savannah and jungle, if you will. And I don't know if you remember this big older lion that was sleeping under that tree, and we weren't very, very close to the lion. And I was doing everything I could to awaken him, just kind of get a reaction, because he was sleeping and did not even care about us. And then, do you remember when he opened just one eye? Like, he opens one eye, he's still laying, and he's looking at us with this one eye, like saying, "Get away, you Muzungu." Muzungu means foreigner, and quite often we are, when you go to Africa, you're called Muzungu, which means foreigner. And he said, "Muzungu, go or you will become my lunch." And remember, we left. And then we stumbled on the hunt. The lionesses were hunting, and we saw them in their natural habitat, which was extraordinary to me. And I remember the way they were walking, the way they were moving. If for me, it felt like all the birds and the monkeys and all the other creatures stopped, the birds stopped chirping, and it felt like the whole nature stopped because the king has arrived. And I remember what God said to me. He said, "I want you to act like this one. I want you to act like my lion." Lions know who they are. You don't have to explain to the lions that they own the place, right? It's mine. They feel when we were there, you could tell that they were like, I'm in my living room. What are you doing here? I'm in my kitchen and you kind of infringing on whatever I'm doing. What are you doing here? That's how I felt. We were infringing on their kingdom. And they don't have to explain to the hyenas, hey, we are lions. No, the hyenas know right away. They smell the lion, they see the lion, they see the lion approaching, and it's like, wow, everything is moved, everything is shaken. And we got to remember that in the Bible it says that we are the followers of the lion from the tribe of Judah. Jesus Christ of Nazareth is the lion from the tribe of Judah. So all those different things were adding up, but those encounters with the lions, the male and the female, it really changed me. And I had two revelations because of this. The first revelation that I received during that time was God saying to me, number one, the most important thing is you have to know who I am. You have to know how powerful your God is. Who is your God? He's the Alpha and Omega. He's the beginning and the end. He is everything. He's the creator of heavens and the earth. He created your enemies. That's how powerful he is. Your enemies exist. Woke up in the morning, they still go on with their business because God, in his mercy, is allowing them to be here for this season. It's like God allows the hyenas to exist for a bigger picture. And then he says, so that's the number one thing. You must know who your God is, how mighty and powerful he is, that he has no ending and no beginning, that he is outside of time. But the second most important thing he said to me is this, that you have to know, you must know who you are in Christ. You're the son of the living God. You're a daughter of Most High God. You are heir to the throne. He calls you your friend, his friends. You will sit on the throne with Jesus Christ. I mean, all those different things. The authority that Jesus had has been given to his church, to his people. You have to understand who you are. Again, we're going back to this picture that lionesses do not apologize for who they are. They take over what's rightfully theirs. We Christians, especially in the 21st century in the West, we apologize for preaching the truth. We apologize for standing for the biblical truth. We are apologizing for God's 10 commandments. We are playing the game of submarine Christianity. We are popping up on Sunday and then we go under the water on Monday. That's not how it's supposed to be. We are called to be visible. We have nothing to apologize for. We have nothing to be ashamed of. The truth stands on its own. You see, the lies need support. The truth is like a pillar. It stands on its own. So those were the things that I was receiving when we went to Africa. Of course, dealing with the poverty and helping the children and doing all those things were amazing. And I'm very super blessed and glad that God allowed us to participate in this. However, those moments alone when we could kind of download what just happened changed my perspective on how I see myself, how I see Christians, a real Christians. I'm not talking about fake. I'm not talking about I'm holy on Sunday and the devil on Monday. I'm talking about the real deal, the one that actually believes. Because there is a difference between people that go to church and true believers. True believers don't go to church to proclaim to the whole world, I'm a believer. They go because the Bible says, do not forsake the gatherings of the saints. They are believers 24 hours a day. They are not believers just on weekend, or they're not fired up believers on Wednesday during the prayer meetings. They are the same throughout the week. They don't have schizophrenia that we see right now, two hats. I'm a believer with the believers, and then I'm an atheist or I'm undercover Christian, during the week in my workplace or with my friends drinking beer or smoking joint or whatever. So lions, when I was watching them, they knew who they were. Their identity was not coming from hyenas, was not coming from the monkeys or other creatures, gazelles. Their identity was coming from how they were created. God created them to be kings. full stop. And they are acting on that destiny. They are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's why we called the book Lions Do Not Bow, because the test in the past few years was a test: who is who in the zoo? Are you lions? Lions do not bow, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, like Daniel, like Esther, like Mordecai, like Deborah, like the judges. They do not bow before the hyenas. Lions do not bow before the hyenas. They eat them for breakfast.
And
And
that is actually the catchphrase that you're very well known for. I can't remember a time where you didn't say that. Even, you had that revelation in Africa, but I since I can remember, I remember you always saying the catchphrase, "Lions do not bow before hyenas." And that's kind of what you got really well known for after COVID, after the Get Out video, after the arrests. And it is very poetic and fitting to call your book "Lions Do Not Bow," and the show "Lions Do Not Bow," because as Christians, we are to be bold as lions, as Proverbs says. And I can pull up dozens of verses that actually say that we are to be like lions. Actually, the Bible compares us to be like lions, to be like eagles. They very often the Word of God uses animals to describe how we should behave. Observe the ant as it works, be busy as a bee, and lions are frequently used. And it's very poetic that you did not bow before the governing authorities, like Acts chapter 4 and 5 tell us, and lions don't bow before hyenas. So it's really this kind of imagery that you're trying to use, and this metaphor that you're trying to use to get people to actually be bold and to not bow before the governing authorities when they're not acting under their their God ordained government mandate. They're acting outside of that.
that's right.
and
But, you know,
and that's
before you go there, that doesn't mean that the lions are the most powerful animals. I mean, the elephant is more powerful than the lion. And there are other animals that are more powerful than lions, and yet the lion is the king. Why? Because the lion acts on his destiny. Lion is taking what has been given to him, not because he's the most powerful, not because he's the strongest or the smartest, because it's his destiny. And that's the point that I'm trying to make, that when you look at the government is more powerful than you and me. The government is more powerful than pretty much all the churches combined together at this moment, because the churches are not acting within the confines of their destiny. They're not walking out their destiny, because if the
But
church was walking,
you've seen that video where it's one lion surrounded by like 14 hyenas getting absolutely destroyed, still keeping them at bay, but getting destroyed. And you can see the lions getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and eventually is going to die. I mean, a pack of hyenas is capable of killing one lion, but this lion miraculously is still fighting and surviving until one thing happened, and that is a second lion showed up, and it was over for the hyenas. They just dispersed and ran away because they knew that they couldn't take on two. One, they could have. They were really getting that energy out of that lion. But then when the second one, that lion's brother or sister, showed up, that was over.
yeah, because the Bible, again, God is referring to that animal in the Bible because it aligns with his word. One can do 1,000, but two can do 10,000. God's mathematics is not the human mathematics. God is in a business of multiplication. So when you align yourself in unity with God's destiny for your life, then everything changes. Suddenly, the enemy is not as powerful as you thought that enemy was. So Goliath and David, the entire nation was terrified, including the king and the generals, the army, the warriors, until one lion, actual lion, shows up. David, 17-year-old, and he looks at this like, excuse me, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Like in his mind, like he is a hyena. Yeah, he's a big hyena, but he's just a hyena. Why are we afraid here? Because when you start to understand who you are, how God made you, and He made you to be victorious. You see, here is the key. He made you to be successful. He made you in a way that everything should go for you, not against you. The only requirement that God is asking or wants is you have to align yourself within, under the umbrella of His perfect will. And sometimes that perfect will is going through the valleys. And we're going to talk about this today. What changed me was that valley when you were
Yeah. So,
born. That's
so
completely changed my life. Christians have this idea, especially in the West, that being a Christian, being a believer, that means roses all the time. But even rose has thorns. That means there will be things in your life that will not go your way, but they will go God's way if you stay under the umbrella of His perfect will. Sometimes His perfect will is to face a giant. You see, before David was able to take down Goliath, remember, he faced some really, really bad circumstances when the bears and the lions were stealing the sheep that he was ordered to protect. So his life was not a rosy life without any problems. He had problems, he had issues, but it was those issues and problems that prepared him for the giant. I prove it to you in the Bible. When he stands before the generals and the king, he says to them, in other words, I'll paraphrase, I faced those difficulties before. I fought with a bear, I fought with a lion, and I prevailed. And the same way I was prevailing against those powerful creatures, I'll prevail against this guy. So you want the proof? I fought with a bear and I won. I fought with a lion and I won. I'm going to win with this guy as well. So what he taught at the very beginning as an obstacle, a roadblock, was actually a preparation, a training ground for what was about to happen. And so your birth, when you were born, that was a preparation for what was about to happen. But of course, at that time, we didn't know. We were still in a business. We started to do really, really well. I started to work with the homeless. Marian Hook, as you remember, I think I shared that last time. He was our first homeless man in
yeah.
1999.
So we ended last time. You escaped communism. You went to Greece. You had a successful business, and then Canada opened its doors. You wanted freedom, and you finally came to Canada, and you did have a successful business, and you started to feel a calling from God to do something else. Something was still holding you back. You weren't fully committed. You were starting to do something, but you were still in business, still very busy, still had a lot on your plate. But you were not always a lion following the lion from the tribe of Judah. You were doing your own thing. And talk a little bit about how you were still holding on to your life as you knew it at that time. You weren't fully committed as a Christian to fully take up your cross, to fully give up everything, as is written in the Bible, to sell everything and follow me, follow Jesus.
Yeah, well, Nathaniel, I think I made a very, very painful later on. It turned out to be a mistake. I associated the actions of corrupted clergy with the holy God. When we were growing up with your mom, in Poland, it was a Catholic country, and the only way you could serve God was by joining the Catholic Church, and either for her to become a nun or for me to become a priest. And I really, really felt that God wanted to use me, that I was to serve Him. I just didn't not, I did not know how. And so the only way I thought God is going to use me if I join the monastery or if I will become a priest. And I've tried that for a while. But again, I saw there's enormous corruption. And I associated the actions of corrupted priests, gambling, women, children, stealing, all kinds of bad things we saw growing up with the holy God. Of course, no one encouraged us to read the Bible. in during that time we were not told, well, read the Bible. We were told to listen to the Catholic Church. And we did. Every week, my mom would send us to the church. We would listen for, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, a mini sermons. And then we would do all the religious things that you're required to do, sit, stand, knees, this, Hail Marys, and, all those different things we would do. But we would come back unchanged because there was no power. There was nothing there. It was just religious ordinances and immense tradition. But when I went to the monastery and when I saw from the inside how corrupted the whole system is, it turned me off. And I vowed at that moment never ever to enter a church building. I find this hilarious right now because I'm a pastor and that's what I do. I preach everywhere I can. And I've attended hundreds, if not thousands, of churches during my travels. So, going back to the story, I went the opposite direction. I became a smuggler. Polish people, unfortunately, because of the depression, because of the communism, because of the tyranny and hopelessness. I mean, if I was to summarize any totalitarian regime, a dictatorship or police state, is hopelessness. People were losing hope. Everything was dark, shadow. People didn't know how to snap out of it, so they turned into alcohol. They started to drink. And my first memories was, right now you visit your friends and the first thing they will ask you usually is, would you like coffee or tea? In Poland was the bottle of vodka. That was the first thing. So I started to drink, Nathaniel, when I was very little. I was young, and it very quickly turned into really drinking. I mean, many times I didn't know what I did. I was
And question,
drunk.
was it common for many Polish people to also be turned off to church, to Christianity because of hypocrisy? Were many other people in the same boat where they turned to things like alcohol, depression because of hypocrisy?
Well, good Polish man is a drunk man. That was it. Every single day you saw drunkards. Every single weekend was, I mean, not drinking. It was like swimming in alcohol, bottles after bottles after bottles. And all my friends, I mean, I was not unique. I was actually holding this demon for a very long time. My friends from the same neighborhood were drunkards years before, at the age of 7, 8, 9. That was normal. That was normal to see kids being, wasted and smoking and drinking. And my friends at that time went even further. The drugs were not widely accessible for the kids, so they were sniffing gasoline and passing out on a regular basis, sniffing gasoline and passing out. And that was the fun that the kids were doing. I mean, it was overall a huge depression, and people didn't know how to snap out of it.
But
That was
here's what I'm trying to get to is there was so much hopelessness and depression and so many people turning to alcohol or any avenue to get away from the pain and the suffering. But Catholicism was absolutely the number one religion and belief system in Poland at that time, like what, 99% Catholic or something, like very
yeah.
high percentage. So why if so many people seemingly were Christians had so much hopelessness, why were they not turning towards Jesus? And like why what was keeping them back?
Well, you see, because of religion. Religion turns people away from God. Relationship with God brings them in. That's the difference. Religion was telling us that God is angry and he wants to smite you, he's going to destroy you. And I mean, you look at God under Catholicism and you are afraid. You're constantly afraid. So you're afraid of the Communist Party, you're afraid of the Russians, you're afraid of your neighbors because they might, call the authorities on you. You're afraid of God, you're afraid of everything. And when you are afraid, when you're terrified of everything around you every single day, you turn to alcohol because alcohol eases the pain, drugs, but only for a season, only for a moment, for a brief moment of time. And then you need it again and again and again until you lose control. I remember when I started drinking, it was it was casual. It was not much, little here, little there, but very quickly, within few months, half a year, it turned into like all the time, everywhere. You couldn't even fathom an idea that you're going to visit someone and there will be no drinking. Every discotheque, every going together with friends was always booze all the time. And I was smuggling alcohol, as you know, from Budapest, from Yugoslavia to Budapest, and we smuggled through Czechoslovakia and to Poland by, of course, bribing the authorities. And everyone was on it. Everyone, police, government. I remember I was smuggling cassettes, like video tapes. I know that's crazy right now because it's all internet, electronics, and streaming. But at that time, we had the VHS, and I was smuggling them. I was selling, buying, exchanging, and that was illegal. You could go to prison for that, but we were doing it for the government officials. The government officials were taking it. Everyone was watching American movies, even though the official party line was you cannot watch pretty much anything from America because America, the West is bad and the East is good. Communism is awesome, prosperous, and amazing. And then capitalism is bad and horrible and it is going to eat you alive. It was hypocrisy everywhere, bribery everywhere. So hopelessness triggered people to look for something to ease their pain. And I fall into that as well. I mean, pretty much everywhere you went was alcohol. All my friends were drunkards. I became a drunkard. And in Greece, that kind of little bit stopped. But then when we emigrated to Canada, I started drinking again very heavily. And it was not good because with drinking comes violence and breaking law and driving drunk and doing all kinds of things that normally you would not do. It's like a hope with the dagger, if you know what I mean. You're turning to the bottle to help in your pain, but then in the morning you realize you just got stabbed by the very thing you were looking for help. And that's exactly what alcohol does. That's what all the sins do. I'm preaching right now, teaching in a church a series of messages about Delilah, pleasure with the dagger. And this weekend I'm going to be talking about consequences. And it's quite fascinating because every time we turn into sin, that sin hugs you only to stab you in the back. You think you're ahead of the game, you think that you're doing better, but in reality, you realize that you just got stabbed double. Not only you don't have the relief from your trouble, from your original problem, now you have additional one. So you got cursed, not blessed. Delilahs. And, we all have Delilahs in our lives. Some people, alcohol may be your Delilah, sex outside of marriage, or porn, or, drugs, or stealing, lying, cheating, whatever, manipulating. Um, People have their Delilahs. And if you toy with the Delilahs, Delilah will put you to sleep on her lap and is going to finish you off. So I had my Delilah and I was drinking pretty much every day beer, and then on the weekends was whiskey. And it was horrible because I was turning into an animal. I was turning into a not a good person. And of course, your mom, my wife, was fighting for me. I call it the 7 years of hell for her because she endured so much. I was not a good person. I was making tons of money. So on the outside, you would say that's a young, successful man, but on the inside was hell on earth, especially for her. And then 1999 shows up, and I usually avoided churches. I would come over there after I'd done horrible things to your mom, or I was drinking so much I really felt horrible. I would go to church with her, and from time to time in that little church they had guest speakers, and this time a Polish prophet came to the church.
Before we continue, I just want to say, so we're talking about this today because the Bible specifically says that you'll overcome the enemy, the devil, by the blood of the lamb and the word of your testimony. And I do think that you have a testimony that is very powerful. I don't want to say it's one of the most powerful, but it is one of the most impactful and inspiring testimonies. And that's why we want people to hear it. I'm not going to interrupt as much as I usually would, unless I think that people need to understand a little bit, or clarify something so people can understand better. So I'm just going to let you talk. And if people want to hear the whole story in detail with pictures, medical records, video footage, all of the evidence to back up what is not just a story, but what actually happened in your life, in my life, in mom's life, and in many people that have been affected by this story. If you want to actually see this, you can actually go to YouTube. It's called Street Advocate. Street Advocate on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing for free, and you can really get a picture of what it looked like. And there's actual footage and actual pictures and medical records and everything that you need to fully understand this story. So, and I'll let you now start.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating when you look at, from the perspective of time. This story has been listened or watched by millions, literally millions, if not tens of millions of people around the world. In Poland alone, this was featured on television and radio, many, many hundreds of radio stations. And it's still to this day, I was told that this story is still circulating on Polish radio. So it's quite fascinating that God would take a nobody, a complete failure, a drunkard that escaped hell on earth, brought hell, because that's the thing I did. I brought hell with me to Canada, and because of it, your mom suffered so horribly. But in 1999, everything started to shift and change because this man, I remember going to the church. I would always hide behind somebody else's back, and I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to be noticed because I just went there because I felt horrible, and I drove your mom there. You know, kind of like a punishment, if you will, and I would really wanted to be left alone. But this man stopped in the middle of his sermon, pointed the finger at me, and he says, "Because you are the way you are and you do those," and he named those horrible things I was doing, "I'm going to take everything away from you and you're going to walk on walls." That's a Polish expression. When you lose everything, you kind of walk on walls, you scratch the walls because of the pain of losing something. And another interesting thing he said is that no one will understand what you're going through, no one will be able to help you except your wife. In other words, your wife will know what's really going on. And and that was actually what happened. She has become that anchor because she was the only one that understood, because she was there in the middle of it, what was really going on. I had very successful business, at that time, over 50 job sites. Sometimes I was hiring 100 people. I think we had 34 employees at that time. We were doing really well, and that was just the beginning. And God started to touch the business in a very powerful way. I started to have encounter weird things. Things were disappearing, robberies. People were stealing stuff, and scaffolding and heavy equipment was disappearing. I was losing every day. I was losing, 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 losing. And yet, at the same time, because of the pain of losing things, I made peace with your mom, with my wife. And in 1999, it sounds long, long time ago. That's 26 years now. I put the bottle on the table. One day I came from work, I put the beer on the table because that was my drink during the week, and then whiskey during the weekend. And I would put the beer on the table and I did not open it, and I would look at it. And I look at it all day that day, went back to work, came back, put the same bottle on the table, and just look at it for the rest of the day. And during that time, my wife came and she looked at me and she said, "Should I be concerned? Should I call a doctor?" I mean, she really thought I'm losing my mind. And here's what I said to her. I took this bottle, and I don't have any bottle here, but let's use this. I I took it in my hand, And I look at her and I said, I just can't believe it. What happened to Artur Pawlowski? What happened to me? I know I was supposed to do something great. I felt in my spirit I was called for something more than to become a slave to a bottle. I said, I can't believe that little thing like this owns me. I'm literally a slave to this bottle. How did that happen? I said to her, I don't know how did that happen. I'm absolutely shocked that a man like me has become a slave to a bottle. And that was the second day. I went to work. The next day I came back, put the bottle on the table, and that was the last time I I bought a liquor. I never opened that bottle. That was in 1999, 26 years ago. And from that moment on, we decided not to touch alcohol. I stopped drinking altogether. And of course, as you know, we work with the homeless people, we work with the drunkards, and we work with addicts. Then our first homeless person came, and I mentioned him again. And my wife, your mom, got pregnant, and we knew that this is going to be an extraordinary thing. A prophet came to us and said that God is saying that He's about to give you a perfect gift. So we knew something amazing is happening. We made peace. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about the business. What I did care about is changing my life completely. And that was about 6 months before you were born. And the doctor said that you're going to be born on the 28th of March, 2000. So we were very excited and we were going to church. My life completely changed, like 180
And
degrees.
the 28th being significant because that's your birthday. So I was due on your birthday. So we were both going to be born on the same day.
Yes. Um, Again, the prophet said that God is going to give us a perfect gift. So we were very excited. I'll never forget this day because I was studying about symbols of slavery, tattoos and earrings. And I wanted to write a book about the symbols of slavery because I saw in the West this absolute crazy fascination of tattoos and earrings and all the mysticism of the East and all this stuff coming in. And they said, this is wrong. We're casting out demons in Africa and in India and other places. And those demons, it looks like they're flying over to America, taking over the people, and they think that this is Christianity. So anyway, I'm studying there. Your mom is having a birth pains and they're intensifying, and I'm sitting over there, with her, reading a book and writing the notes and preparing myself, for that book. And suddenly I'm sitting over there and I don't know what happened. And now I know it was the Holy Spirit. At that time, I didn't understand what was happening to me. It's just like someone hit me with a baseball bat and said, the baby cannot be born. And I stood up and I said to your mom, I said, stop it. You cannot deliver the baby. And she looked at me like I'm crazy. I mean, literally, you can't stop it, even if you wanted to. But I said,
And
stop this baby.
saying that to a pregnant woman is
Oh,
dangerous.
I'm telling you, if she could, she probably would shoot me. She looked at me like really, really angry. And I said, stop. This baby is not coming out because it hit me. For months, Nathaniel, we were thinking about a name for the baby. We didn't know. The doctors didn't tell us if it's going to be a boy or a girl. So I bought and I rented from library all kinds of books with hundreds of thousands of names. And I was every day with your mom, we were going through the names, and some were awesome names. It's just something did not feel right. It was not the right name. So I'm in a hospital in Calgary's Children's Hospital in Calgary. Your mom is having pains intensifying. She's already laying there. It's She's about to give a birth, and I'm telling her stop because I feel within me it's like I've heard a voice. The baby cannot be born unless we name it. So I gave your mom a piece of paper, and I had a piece of paper. Gotta remember, I was not writing notes for the book. about slavery. And I said, you write the names, you pray, and you write the names that God is giving you for the baby, and I will do the same thing. And the name that repeats without us talking on my paper and your paper, that's the name that God wants to name this child. And I'm telling you, she was super mad, but I'm a very stubborn person. And I just, I looked in a way that she knew she's not going to win here. And she started to write the names. And I did the same thing. And then I took, when she was done, she put number of names on her piece of paper. I did the same thing. And you got to remember, she was writing between the bird pains. Like, so you've got a little bit of yelling, and then there is a little bit of breather. She writes a name. It's like, wah! And then again, she writes, it was crazy. Put it this way, delicately. She didn't like me at that moment at all. But when everything was done, the baby was not coming yet, and I took the paper and I compared. You got to remember, Nathaniel, we didn't know. No one told us. God didn't tell us. The doctors didn't tell us that the baby that is about to be born is going to be a boy. We didn't know that. But the only name that was on her piece of paper and my piece of paper was the name for a boy, name Nathaniel, which in Hebrew means gift from God. So half a year before we had a prophet, God is going to
And this
give.
and this is an important part of the story, because if you hadn't named that child before, the story wouldn't have been able to be the story that it is today, because that fact of the name and the meaning of the name is important, and you use that. Actually, you'll I'm sure you'll explain it in a little bit, but that name is significant in what happened after. You needed to name that. Maybe the Holy Spirit told you to name it before, because of what happened next.
Yes, everything ties together. I mean, if you hear the entire story, you will just say, wow, everything had to be done in a precise matter in order to fit in this narration, in this story, in this miracle, because that's what it is. So the only name that was on her piece of paper, mine, was Nathaniel. So you've got 6 months before the prophet, a man that I've never met. I didn't know who he was. He says, God is going to give you a perfect gift. That's very important, perfect gift. Then the doctors say that you're going to be born the same day I was born, which is a birthday gift. And then I'm sitting over there, someone whacks me in the head. I jumped out of the chair and I was like, you cannot, this baby is not coming out without naming the kid. It was like it came over me. I don't know what happened. Now I know it was the Holy Spirit. At that time I had no clue. I just knew in my heart this baby is not going to be born without naming it. It just cannot. So we decided that this is the name that God has chose, Nathaniel, which means in Hebrew gifts from God. So, and then the baby comes. Your mom is not a tall lady, and it was very painful for her to give birth. And I will never forget, I'll never forget this moment, because the expectation for every woman giving birth is the baby comes out and you hear the cry of the baby. And it's an instinct, it's a natural thing. Every mother, every woman waits for that cry. That means everything is fine. And the doctors did x-rays, they did everything they were supposed to do, and they did not catch a problem. No one knew that there is a problem. You came out purple. You know, I don't know how to explain that. When you see a body that did not have oxygen for a long period of time, the color of the skin turns bluish, purplish way. You came lifeless. I saw you coming out, and it was the most horrifying thing I've ever seen, a lifeless body coming out. And then when I look at it, the doctors started to run around, and they called some other people and intercom, and some other doctors and nurses came, and machinery came, and all kinds of crazy things were happening. And me, I was like taken out of time. I was observing this. It felt like I'm out of this room and I'm just watching what's going on. I looked to your mom, and I saw her eyes. Her eyes went big, like big eyes, like you see in a deer. She knew something is horribly wrong. Something is really, really bad. The fear, the pain is just like, this is not good. They were working on you, trying to bring you back to life so you can breathe. They brought some machinery. They tried to clean it. We didn't know what's going on. They didn't know what's going on because the X-ray did not show, the ultrasound didn't show any problem. You were fine. As far as we knew, and the doctors, everything was perfectly healthy and good. But you were not alive and you were not breathing until this one moment that you caught the breath. Later on, the doctors told us that that was an absolute miracle, that they were surprised that you were actually able to catch the breath. Why is this important? Because later on we find out that you didn't have a lung. So that's why they said this is an absolute miracle that you caught that breath, and they put you into the machinery that started to breathe for you. Otherwise, you would not be here at all. So that was the first miracle. They tried to find out what the problem was and they couldn't. So they called an expert, and the expert came and did find out that in your diaphragm, in the muscle that separates the bowels from the upper chest, was a hole. And through that hole, all the bowels went up and smashed your upper chest. It pushed the heart in opposite direction, and it's destroyed your upper chest. So we find that out. It took them, if I remember correctly, I got 3 books on this whole craziness from the hospital and the X-rays to prove it. I think they took 5 hours to prepare you for transport. Um, my wife, so your mom, stayed in a hospital. I think it was Rocky View Hospital, and they took you by ambulance and they moved you to the children's hospital, to the specialized unit, intensive care. And I went over there. It was about 12 o'clock at night, and I remember those 3 doctors coming, and they said, um, "We have bad news." Three doctors, 3 separate doctors. They examined you. They saw everything that is going on, and they said, "We should consider unplugging you from the machinery because you will never be normal. Even if you," they said, "even if you survive this night, you will become a vegetable for the rest of your life because of the damage that was done to your upper chest." And I remember listening to this, but sometimes you listen, but you don't register. I was numb. I didn't know how to react. But your mom said absolutely not from the hospital. She was still in Rockview. She said, "No, we're not unplugging him. We're fighting." And she called everyone she knew, all the people from the church, all the pastors, associated churches in Poland, in Canada, in Toronto, everywhere she could reach, she did, asking for prayers. And of course, the next day she came to the hospital. She was told what I was told, and that was going on for a few days. You were put on a special machinery tube inside of you that was doing the breathing. All your functions were taken by the machine. All the everything. I mean, everything was done by the machinery. I'll never forget this little tiny body. You were just born, and on this huge machinery inside this pure little room in Calgary's intensive care unit. And well, there you go. That's literally after you were born. They put you into this ventilator because they didn't know what's going on yet at this moment. They tried to find out, trying to find out why you were not breathing, what happened, why you were not breathing. And after they find out that's the problem, they could not see that they could fix the problem because of the damage. They asked us to unplug. We said no. And then the fight started. And that was going on for a few days. They couldn't do anything to you because you were too weak. You were too weak. And they were afraid that if they would operate you, and again, that's the picture of just literally hours. I think within 2 hours, this was taken. They were still looking. What is the problem? What is happening with this boy? Later, they find out. So I was uh, I was going to work. God was dealing with my business. It was very bad. I had to borrow money for the parking at that time. So it was very difficult season in our lives, and I went um, into an open rebellion, if you will, to God. I remember Pastor Greg, a Polish guy. He was a Polish pastor in a local church. He came, I think it was 12:31 in the morning, and he came and he did not say a word. He just hugged me, and I said to him, Greg, I don't think I want to serve God like this. That's what I said to him. I don't think I want to serve God like this. And I left him. I left him there. I went to the parking to pick up the car in a hospital, and I was yelling and screaming. I kicked the car. I was very aggressive, and there were a few people over there that I scared them to their deaths. They were actually running away. I screamed at God. I called him a psychopath. I called him, "Why are you doing this to me? Who are you? This is crazy." So I went a full blown rebellion against God, and then I calmed down. The next day, I went to work. I had to work. Marzena was staying in the hospital, and here's the difference. I withdraw myself from the emotions completely, but your mom, she was hugging you, she was touching you, she was playing 24 hours, 7 days a week, Christian music. She was reading Bible to you. It was like completely different story. And towards me in rebellion towards God, angry, bitter, and then your mom full of faith and hope, never even did not cross her mind that we might lose you. And that's a fascinating part of the story, because when I share my side of the story, to me, seeing you coming out dead, purple, not breathing, I've lost you. I truly believe that's it. It's over. When your mom shares the story, it did not even cross her mind that we're going to lose you. For her, you never died. You were always born for a purpose with a destiny, a mighty destiny. And she was holding on to this hope. It's like the same circumstances, the same situation, the same tragedy. And yet she saw everything through the eyes of faith and the future. I saw everything through the eyes of calamity, depression, anger, rebellion, you know, all the negative things. So fast forward. I mean, it takes me 3 hours to tell the story, but I went to work. Your mom would stay behind. I would go from work, change, come to the hospital to to change her. She would take the car. She would go home to eat, change, take a shower, because she was there 24 hours a day. And as I'm standing there, Nathaniel, and you got to remember, I was a businessman. And if you know anything about business people that are not really fully Christian, we are very pragmatic people. In other words, show me the money. Show me the money on the table. We talk business. Show me the property. Let me see blueprints. Very pragmatic. I want to see it. I want to touch it. Then I will believe it. We didn't. People like me don't believe in visions and dreams and all these voices and all those different things. We believe in what we see. So I have glasses here. Those are glasses. I can touch them. I can see them. I can use them. This is a book. I can see it. I can touch it. It's a real thing. If you started to tell me about visions and dreams and voices during that time, I would say, you know, you're nuts. Whatever you're drinking obviously is not working. You should stop, and stop immediately. It's not good for you. So um, I'm standing there in this clean white environment, in this room in Calgary, intensive care, children's hospital. You're hooked to everything you can imagine. You did not have even a vein, one single vein that they could put a needle in. You had needles on your head, you had needles even in your, in your arms, in your feet, everywhere. I mean, whatever there was a vein, they would plug something in it. You didn't have a vein available for them, and that was a problem, because they told me that if a vein collapses or something happens, it's over. They didn't have a place to put additional things that they needed to put, because everything was taken. Also, the sound of breathing the machine was doing, like, breathing for you. And then from time to time, you would be shaken, like your whole body would be shaken out of pain. I was told. And I'm standing over there. Be mindful that at this moment, I numb myself. I did not even touch you. I was afraid that if I touch you, like your mom was doing all the time, I would break. My heart would break into half and I would collapse. I would die. I was so afraid to even touch you, because to me, you were dead. To me, there was no hope. The doctors said there's no hope. So it was just a matter of time. And as I'm standing there, Nathaniel, a big screen TV, I don't know how to explain this. I was taken into a different realm. I started to see things that were absolutely crazy. I saw Jesus in Gethsemane. I saw him sweating with blood. I saw a mob of people, and they looked like thirsty hyenas, wolves, a pack of wolves, thirsty for blood. I saw this young guy, they caught him, and they were so rough, so aggressive with him, that they stripped him naked, and he runs away for his life naked. It was a mob of hungry hyenas, hungry wolves that came to arrest Jesus Christ.
So
I
we've
saw.
so we've seen The Passion. Was it like that, or was it different?
Well, if you compare to The Passion of Christ by Mel Gibson, it was nothing like it. I mean, Mel Gibson did it in a very naive and gentle way of what really happened. I mean, what I saw with my own eyes, it was so drastic, it was so brutal. The fighting, the brutality, the beating started in Gethsemane. They roughed him up already. They really were not nice. Mr. Jesus, can you come with us? We need to, ask you a few questions. It was a mob of hungry wolves ready to tear things to shreds. I remember the conversations, and also I remember their clothes. I've never seen clothes like this before in my entire life. They were dressed differently. I saw Roman soldiers, I saw people with clubs, I saw some kind of a long, I know what I saw was the priest's garments. And there were a bunch of them. Also, some movies I remember watching, there were just, dozen of them. I saw at least 1,000 people that came to arrest Jesus. It was a big number of people. It was not just a little, you know, mob. It was a big mob of
And
people.
at this point, you had obviously knowledge of the Bible, but you didn't know it so intimately to somehow know these details that are historically and theologically accurate, like the priest's clothing, like the different events, the guy running naked, all these things that are corroborated by the eyewitness testimonies. You wouldn't have known that at this time.
No, also fascinating part of the story, which I didn't know at that time, was that when they asked him, who's Jesus? Where's Jesus? And he said, I am. The power, and I saw this with my own eyes, the power that knocked those people, over 1,000 people, to their knees, to their backs. Actually, they were knocked to their backs. It was the most powerful thing I've ever seen. It was like, I don't know how to describe, a nuclear bomb, a blast that kind of knocks everything. They were knocked. And then the next image I saw was all of them on their knees. And I'm thinking, like, this is crazy. What am I seeing? And it kind of hit me. And later on, of course, when I was analyzing what I saw, every knee will bow. Those people, this mob thirsty for blood, came and God said, I am. The power hit them to a point that they fall to the ground, and to stand up, they had to go to their knees. You can't, if you're laying on the ground, you can't stand up without going to your knee. You have to go to your knee to stand up when you're knocked in such a way. It was unbelievable. Of course, later on, I understood what I was seeing. At that time, I had no clue what is happening to me. Then I saw the trial. It was a religious trial. I saw people dressed all alike. They had those garments, and they were asking him all kinds of questions. They were angry, aggressive, yelling, screaming, calling him names. And then I saw this young guy with a beard, and he was some kind of a priest, but he was a younger guy. He runs to Jesus and punches him in such a way that, he hits him and grabs this side of his beard and pulls it out and rips a portion of the beard and the skin out of Jesus's face, and the blood splatters all over, including my face. I saw people coming to him and punching him with a fist. I saw others slapping him, mocking, laughing, spitting. It was too much. And when I share the story, why is this important? Because if you know my background, I was a professional boxer. I made it to represent my country in Poland as a boxer. So I was accustomed of, fighting and seeing blood, and that was a normal thing for me, seeing other guy, bleeding. That's what you do. That's the whole point, to knock someone out. Also, you got to remember, at this time I was a black belt, a martial art, and I fought in all kinds of different committees, and I've knocked people to the ground. They had to be taken by the doctors, all kinds of different things. So I was accustomed with brutality, put it this way. What they did, Nathaniel, to Jesus is unbelievable. This level of hatred and brutality I've never witnessed in my life, and I couldn't bear it. So this vision, this I'm in the vision, it's not just the TV. I'm there. I'm inside of what is happening. They don't see me, but I see everything. And when the blood splatters all over my face, I couldn't take it anymore. And I literally stormed out of the intensive care, out of your room, and I started to run. And I ran very fast outside of the hospital, and the vision ended. And that was it. I went home, went to work the next day, came back, the same thing, exchanged your mom. She went home. I stood in exactly the same corner watching you. And again, the machinery boom, you know, pushing, pumping air into your body. Later on, we find out that when they opened you up, you didn't have a lung. So, but the machinery was doing all this work. And I'm standing over there, I'm looking at you, the same thing. And then suddenly, boom, this thing opened. And when I'm in the same moment in time when I left the previous day. They took him to Pontius Pilate. I can tell you the conversations. I was standing there listening to them talk. Jesus talked. He talked to the Pontius Pilate. It was not like he didn't say a word. He was talking. They were conversing back and forth. I remember when he was talking about the truth, and it was quite fascinating because when I was observing Pontius Pilate, the governor, I remember that he was very curious. He was very interested in Jesus. It was not like he never heard about the guy, and he really wanted to know. He was very into this conversation. He was very interested to find out about Jesus. He heard about Jesus before, and he was very curious. And So I saw this thing going on back and forth, and then I saw the beating after of the Roman soldiers and the mocking. This was so brutal. So Mel
Could you
Gibson,
could you could you understand what they were saying?
yes, 100%. It's so fascinating because I could hear them and I could understand everything that was going on and everything they were saying. And it was like I'm there with a full knowledge of what is happening. They cannot see me, but I'm there observing everything, and I can look around and I can see and I can hear and I can understand everything that is going on. Mel Gibson, the beating, I think that was very close, very accurate of what happened. They, I don't know how to describe it. It's like they chopped his skin to pieces. It was so brutal. It was so, it's like the whole hell pounded on Jesus.
With those Roman bone metal whips that clawed. They had these claw
Yeah,
whips.
yeah. They shred his skin. It was very brutal. It was I was looking at this and I couldn't bear it. You're observing someone being tortured in this way, and it's just like, this is too much. I cannot endure this anymore. And you know what's interesting through this whole? I quite often forget about this, and it's so important. I did not feel Jesus's pain. So I'm watching this is the most horrible thing I've ever seen in my life to this day, and that's 25 years later. I've never seen something more brutal than this. This was the most brutal thing I've ever seen, but I did not feel the pain. Sometimes you can associate the pain of the victim and you can feel it. I didn't feel a thing. I was completely numb to physical pain. I didn't feel it. But you know what I felt? I felt the Father's pain. And of course, I understand that He only allowed me to feel a little bit or I would die. So the Father God was watching His Son going through this craziness, and I could feel His pain, the Father's pain. And that's very important because his heart was bleeding as they were beating Jesus, as they were torturing Jesus, as they were doing those most horrible things, mocking, spitting, slapping, punching, torturing Jesus Christ. His heart was broken. He was bleeding. It was so much pain. And I could see, I saw him. I saw the God. I didn't see his face, but I saw God sitting on the throne, and he was sitting on the edge. Sometimes when you sit on the edge of the chair, you're ready to jump, you're ready to run. That's how he was sitting. He was not sitting comfortable like a king, like observing, watching a Netflix movie. He was on the edge. He was like every fiber of his being was alert, was ready to jump and strike and go. And I felt his thoughts. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. I felt him saying, I can turn them into dust. Who they think they are, those ants. He saw us as ants, and he says, I can turn them into dust like this, like this, like this. That's what I've heard, but he didn't do it. He restrained himself. Is the only way I can describe is that he wanted this to stop and to end, but he was restraining himself for something bigger, for something, for a bigger love. I don't know how to explain that, because he loves the son with everything he is, but he restrained himself for something even bigger than that.
Which
Eh,
makes sense because even Jesus being fully God didn't even want it to happen. He said, "Let if this cup can pass, if there's any other way, then take this from me," because he didn't even want to do it. I mean, the separation from God from for taking all of sin was so much that he asked God, well, he asked the Father if he could have this taken away.
yeah, yeah, he was terrified. When I saw him in Gethsemane, he was sweating um, with blood. a sweat with blood. And of course, at that time, I didn't understand what that was. But after whatever I saw, I Googled things up and I started to do my little research. What did I see? And I find out that when you're in extreme stress, I mean, a stress to a point of dying, you can sweat with blood. And that's exactly, he was terrified. Jesus was afraid of what's about to happen to him. Not only the physical torture, but the separation from God, and also taking the sin, the wickedness, the evil, the rapes, the stealing, the lying, the all the evil you can imagine. He took it upon himself. He became sin. But going back to the story, when the Romans were torturing him, I couldn't bear it. I ran away from the hospital for the second time, and the vision stopped. I ran, and it stopped, and I went outside. I calmed down, and I said, "Well, this is getting ridiculous." I Deep inside I realized that I cannot run. I mean, I cannot keep running. So I went back to the hospital. I calmed down.
At this point, did you tell mom about the visions that you were seeing the day before?
No, because apparently I don't remember that. I don't remember much after, but I could not talk for 3 days. So I couldn't talk at all. I don't even remember that. And you know me, Nathaniel, all my life. I mean,
Oh, you can't stop talking.
I can't stop talking, and that's a problem sometimes. It can be a big problem. But Majena said that I could not talk. I did not talk for 3 days, which is crazy. I don't even remember that.
My
I
guess is
was,
if you had told her on day one of it, she would be like, "Get back and finish it."
yeah, no, I did not talk. I didn't talk for 3 days to anyone. Couldn't talk. So I went back to the hospital, stood in the same corner again, and the vision started when it left. So I realized that this God, this someone powerful, decided that I am to watch this to the end, and there's no escaping it. So I just stood over there as the vision, as the scenery was changing and the things were happening. I saw him going through Jerusalem. Um, I saw I saw the place where he was crucified, and it was quite fascinating because I didn't know, of course, at that time, that the way it was set up, the people, I saw people sitting on the roof. I mean, for our Western mind, like, what are you talking about? Who sits on the roof to watch something? I saw a lot of people sitting on the roof, tables, drinking, having great time, as well as like entertainment for them. There was a bunch of people on the roof sitting and just enjoying the crucifixions. So it was not like the people were gathered around, 10,000 people just woo cheering. I saw them enjoying themselves and watching this as an entertainment. And then he went to the place. I was outside the gate. And it's very interesting because I saw the actual place of the crucifixion. And it was like two roads. One was going this way and another one was going that way. And I saw that with all my eyes. And they crucified him. When they crucified him, Nathaniel, he was crucified naked. He was not covered. His body was not covered at all. You could see everything except, here's an interesting thing, his entire body was red. You could not see a skin. You couldn't see the color of his skin. Everything was blood. Everything was blood, blood, blood. The whole body of Jesus was bloody. That's how much they tortured him. He was crucified naked. I saw darkness. I saw a darkness that I cannot explain. Um, this was a physical, tangible darkness. It was like a living darkness. It was darkness that I've never seen before or since. It was a darkness that you couldn't move, you couldn't see a thing. It was a total blackout on earth. Now when you go outside and in the middle of the night you have moon, you have stars, you've got a little bit of light somewhere here or there. During that time was a total darkness. You couldn't move. You couldn't do anything. It was paralyzing darkness. I saw when he gave up his soul, when he died, I saw a close up of a bird, like a little tiny bird. I've never seen a bird like this before until we went to Jerusalem, to Israel together. And I remember, like, wow, that's the bird I saw in my vision, because we don't have them in Poland, or I've never seen them in Greece or in Canada. And the close up was of a beak and the eyes, and I saw a tear coming. The bird was crying. And then I saw a speck of grass. I can't explain it to you. I saw a speck of grass
A
crying.
blade of glass of grass.
Yeah, blade of grass, crying. The grass was crying. It looked like the creation. It felt like the creation was crying because the creator just died for the creation. And then I saw an earthquake, and this was not a regional earthquake. It was a global one. I saw it with my own eyes, the whole globe breaking in half. It's like a crack all across. If you were to go and dig, you would see the entire globe is cracked in half globally. It went around the earth. And then it was over. It was done. And then, as I'm shocked, I'm not saying anything. I'm standing over there and I hear a voice, audible voice, that speaks to me and says, "What would you do to save your son?" And I answered. And again, I don't know if I was speaking, that you could hear me, or I was speaking to that voice in my mind. I can tell you at all I spoke. That's how I remember. That's how I see it. I answered to him, but either it was audible or not, I don't know. But I said to this voice that spoke to me, I said, anything, tell me to kill, and now I wiped out half of this hospital. That's what I said to that voice. And then he answered without changing a tone at all. Like you know, he was not shaken or moved, or he didn't change at all by my answer that I'm ready to wipe out half of the hospital. He says, but you cannot save your son, but I could save my son. And I didn't do it. You know why? And he paused. And then he said, for you and for the rest of the people. I think at that moment, Nathaniel, I think that my heart broke. I truly believe that the heart of stone, broke completely, because I had a vision of two hearts and two hands. In one hand was a heart, my heart. It was ugly, it was yucky, it was like a tar. Have you seen the tar? Like sometimes when they dig oil out of the ground, you've got that tar before they make it pure, and it's black, it's yucky, it's ugly, it's kind of like going through the fingers. It's horrible. I saw sin, I saw wickedness, I saw evil, and I knew this is my heart. That was my heart. And then I saw another heart, pure, crystal like, see through, moving. Inside things were moving over there. It was the most pure thing I've ever seen. It was the total holiness, righteousness. It was something I've never seen before, and I've never seen anything like it since. It was a heart of purity, holiness, righteousness. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. That was the heart of the God, of the Father. And I realized, I think for the first time in my life, that I'm a horrible person. I'm actually really, really horrible. I would cause other fathers pain. I would kill in my heart. Remember what I said, I'll wipe out half of the hospital if needs be in exchange for your life. It's like, signing a pact with the devil or giving your soul to the devil for something. um, I realized that I would kill someone's daughter or someone's mother or someone's son just so I can avoid pain. In other words, I would cause pain so I don't have to feel pain. But God chose pain so I don't have pain. So I don't have to feel pain. It totally two fathers. We're dealing with two fathers. One is willing to cause pain so he doesn't have to be in pain. Another one chose pain so his enemy, a person like me, would not feel pain. Completely two different fathers. And I realized I'm a horrible person, horrible person. And I left. At that time, um, Pastor Greg was organizing a vigil for you and for us to pray for us. And until then, I refused to pray. I refused to do anything with the church. I was so angry. I was so bitter. I was so in rebellion with God. I didn't want to participate in anything. But after this vision, after what he said, after the vision of the two hearts, I decided to go with Majana to the church, but I did not participate. I stood in the back by the entry. And then finally, I lifted my hands. And that's where we're going to the story of your name, to the timing of your birth, and to the promise that we received from the prophet that God is going to give us a perfect gift. You see, he gave us a gift, but he wanted to change me. He wanted me to give it up. And so I lifted my hands to God and I said, God, I'm giving you Nathaniel, just like Abraham gave Isaac on the altar. I'm giving you my son on the altar. And whatever happens, if you choose to heal him, to give him back, or if you have chosen to take him home, I'm giving you my word. As I'm standing there with my hands, I'm giving him my word. And I said, I will serve you for the rest of my life. I'm giving you my oath that no matter what your answer is regarding to this boy, I'm going to serve you for the rest of my life. And I started to cry like I've never cried before. And we used to have this saying that a real man do not cry. That's garbage. That's just not true. Actually, real men do cry. Jesus cried. Tears are important and they are needed at times. And I started to sob and I'm crying and I'm sobbing and my hands literally holding you on the altar like Abraham, Isaac. I have given you. So the gift that was given to me, I'm giving it back to God. And I'm crying and tears are coming. You know what's interesting about those tears is that every tear that was coming, I saw it. I cannot explain it to you, but every tear was representing thing that I have done. Smuggling, drinking, beating, fighting, punching, every sin, every horrible thing I have done in this life. Every tear was representing something that I've done. It's like I was crying out my sins one after another. I cannot explain this, but I cried and I cried and I sobbed and I couldn't stop. And my hands in the air. I don't know what was going on. I don't know who was at the meeting. I don't I've heard nothing. I didn't see anything except you on the altar with my hands up dealing with God and just sobbing and crying. I don't know how long this was going on. I know that when I was done, I didn't have any tears to cry. I mean, literally, I ran out of tears, if you know what I mean. I couldn't cry anymore. There were no tears coming. I wanted to cry more, but I had no more tears. I calmed down and I repeated that vow to God again. I said, God, whatever you have decided, if you decided to take him home, or if you have decided to heal him, to give him back, I'm giving you my oath that I will serve you for the rest of my life. But if you will decide to give us our son, I will be grateful to you for the rest of my life. And Nathaniel, nothing happened. There was no thunder, there was no shaking, there was no earthquake, there was no voice that spoke to me. It was total silence. but I had no more tears to cry. We went home. I don't even remember how we got home. It was certain parts are completely blackouts. I don't remember nothing except Majena told me after that I could not talk for 3 days. I don't remember that at all because when I was dealing with God, I was speaking, I was saying, but how I was saying, when you talk to God, you don't have to use your voice. You use your voice from the inner man. And I went to work, came back, the same scenario. I would exchange your mom. She would go change, and that was going on for a few days until one day that they decided that you're strong enough that they're going to open you up and find out what's really going on there. And I have the surgeon's report that opened you up and said that there's no even a trace of a lung. Like there's no way you can ever breathe on your own. And that's why the doctor said before that you will be like a vegetable. So your body will grow, but you will never be normal. You will never be able to live on your own without the machinery that breathes for you. That's why they ask us to unplug you. And I remember because Mazena after told me that she met with the surgeon. I was at work. She laid hands on the surgeon and she blessed her with God's perfect will and an anointing to do what needed to be done. Anyway, fast forward, they opened you up, they saw you back in, and I got back from work. And as I walk in, there is people in a hallway.
No, no, now they cut me open to see what they could do, but then they gave an answer to mom about what they saw. What did they say?
Yeah, I already mentioned that you don't have a lung.
No, but they said that they can't really do anything because if they move anything around, then they're risking the heart stopping or other
Yeah,
complication or organs failing.
yeah, they couldn't do anything because you were just a tiny newborn baby, and the problem with you was you were too weak, and that's why they didn't open you up early because you would die at the operation table. And that was the fear that even if they tried to do something, you might die at the operating table. So they waited and waited and waited. And then when they did it, they decided not to do anything. They sew you back in, they pushed the bowels down, sew you back in, leave the heart alone, even though it was on the wrong side. And they sew you back in. And they said to mom, because I was at work, that if you survive the night, that there is hope that that you might survive another day. But this was those few hours that were decisive if you're going to live or die. So I came, I think it was in the morning, so it was the next day. As I'm walking into the hospital, the people are pointing a finger at me, like, that's the father of the star baby. And nurses, and there's commotion. I can see people being stirred. I have no idea, no one told us anything what was going on, and they are pointing the finger. And then few days passed already from the vision, and nothing happened until that morning when people are saying that's the father of star baby. So I go to the intensive care thinking that you're gone and it's over, because during this time we saw other children coming and dying, and you know new children, and some died. It's intensive care, children are dying. And that's what I was thinking is going to happen to you, that God dealt with me. I made peace with God, and I'm going to come to the hospital and you will be gone, and that will be the end of the story. um, and I had to come and be okay with my soul about this. And as I'm reaching the intensive care, the same three doctors came to the room and they said, Mr. Pulaski, you have to come with us. We want to show you something. So I did not even enter the room. They caught me outside of the room. They asked me to follow with mom. We went to this x-ray room. At that time, 25 years ago, was not the computer that they were showing you x-rays. It was a x-ray room with lights behind, and there was about eight, I would say 7 8 x-rays, one next to another. And they said, Mr. Pawlowski, We want you to see something. They showed, you see, in this picture, you can see clearly with your eyes on the left side the bowels. You can see the bowels right all the way up. So you see the right side is relatively open, but the left is completely taken over by the bowels that went through the little hole in that muscle and smashed the upper chest, everything inside. So as we are standing in this, x-ray room, that same three doctors that remember told us to unplug told me, as when I was still in the hospital, um, where she was giving birth, I was in a children's hospital. They said consider unplugging him because he's not going to survive and this and that vegetable. And the same doctor said, Mr. Pawlowski, look at the first picture. And they showed me and says, you see this? Those are the bowels. This is the damage. This is the heart. The heart is on opposite side. Um, but this morning something happened. We thought it's a malfunction of the equipment because your son's body started to fight with the machinery. So we thought that there is a error or a problem, and we took the breathing tube out, thinking that there is some problem with the machinery. But behold, your son was fighting with the machinery, and when we took the tube out, he started to breathe on his own. And they look at me, and I'm thinking, okay. And he said, "You don't understand what we're saying, right?" I said, "Not really. What are you saying?" And they said, "Your son cannot breathe on his own. It's impossible. It's medically impossible for your son to breathe on his own." But he is breathing on his own. So we started to take pictures every hour, and that's why we have all those different pictures, because every hour was another picture taken, and the lung that was not there. Remember, the surgeon opened him up and saw that the lung is not there. And said, and they said, those three doctors said, but every hour the lungs are appearing and they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you can see the picture right here. Within a few hours, the lung that was not there is there. And they said, we call a symposium of doctors about your son, and we came to one conclusion, and one conclusion only. Your son should not be alive, but is living. Your son should not be breathing, but is breathing. So we called your son Star Baby. It's like a baby that came from the stars. And that's where the people were saying, as I was walking, the whole hospital was stirred because of the story. And they called you a star baby, a baby that came from the stars. It should not be alive, but is living, should not be able to breathe, but is breathing on his own. And of course, you were examined for about 10 years after that, about the story, and different doctors came and different specialists were observing, looking at this. I mean, there's no real medical explanation what happened to you. And this is what they said. And I find this fascinating because probably today they would never say something like this because of political correctness and this wokeness that we're facing right now. But at that time, they look at me and your mom and they said, it looks like your God heard your prayers. That's what they said, those doctors. Um, Eccles, if I remember correctly, was the surgeon, Eccles, Dr. Eccles. It was a woman that opened you up, and then the three specialists were looking at this case. So now, fast forward. Uh, During that meeting, also, they said, well, it's a miracle. We can't explain what happened, but those atheists, those people that always use those bots, and they said, your son is going to have allergies. Your son is not going to be able to do things like other kids. Your son will not be able to swim. Your son will never be hiking, and you will have for a few years oxygen bottle with you and everywhere you go. And they're giving me this list, and I'm looking at them, and I'm looking at the pictures, and I'm like, seriously? And I said, when my God heals, He heals. And the first thing I taught you when I took you out of the hospital was diving, of course, against the doctors, and they would probably, if they saw me, they would take you away. because I put a whole bathtub of water and I just put you under because they said this could kill you. And I said, no way. You are alive, you're healthy. God fixed you up, He healed you, and there will be no problem with you. And as you know, I mean, you're looking at the walking, living miracle that swims like a fish, you know, skis and does all kinds of crazy things, and without any issues or problems. And that was 25 years ago. But going back to the story, what that did to me, maybe for the first time in my life, it showed me that God is bigger than our understanding. That God is not operating within the confines of time, that He's outside of time. He takes me 2,000 years ago to see a crucifixion. He puts up with my craziness of saying I'll wiped out half of the hospital, and He doesn't even blink an eye. He deals with a stony heart and shows me how wicked and evil I am. He touches me to a point that I'm willing to give away a sacrifice that no man is capable of doing, really. I sacrifice, I gave you like Abraham, Isaac on the altar. And I said with a sincere heart that even if he takes you away, I'm going to serve him for the rest of my life. I'm not going to live just for myself. I will live for his kingdom, and I'll forward his kingdom, and I will obey what he wants me to do. And that takes me to a prophecy that he said before you were born. And he said, you're very stubborn. He said, you are like a donkey, he said. And it's quite fascinating because few days before that meeting, I overheard a conversation between an older elder in the church and somebody else. And this man said that Ardo Pulaski is black sheep, that nothing ever, nothing good will come out of me. That's what he said. He looked at my life and he looked how bad I was, and he decided that there's no way that Arthur Pulaski can be changed. I'm so horrible. I'm so evil. I'm useless, and there's no hope for me. And I remember hearing this, and it kind of cut me to the heart. And I remember I went home, and you know, in my sitting on a fence state, a little bit of the devil, a little bit with God, I prayed to God and I said, God, and that's how I always prayed. I just talked to him and I said, God, you've heard this man. He believes that there is no good in me, that there will never be anything good that will come out of me. But I've read in your Bible, I said to him, a story about the donkey. And I said to God, I said, you used a dirty animal and you used him for your kingdom. You used a dirty animal, and I think I'm a little bit higher. Maybe not too much, but I think I'm a little bit higher than a donkey, a dirty animal. So if that's the case, if you use a donkey, I will become your donkey. I want to be your donkey.
Not
Use me.
once, but he used the donkey a few times in the Old
Yes.
Testament and the New.
And here is a fascinating part of the story, because this prophet, his name is Krzywy, Richard Rysiek Krzywy. He's a Polish guy, and he's preaching at the church, and he stops and he calls me out. And I always hated it when the preachers did that, because I didn't want to be in a spotlight. I didn't want to be noticed in a church. I was always in the back hiding. But he asked me to come, and as I'm walking, he says, you are my donkey. You see, listen, even your mom didn't know about this conversation I had with God. It was just between me and him. That's it. No one heard, no one knew how I talked to God about this donkey business. But this guy, a prophet of God, he sees me, he points a finger, and he says, you are my donkey. And I'm going to ride on you like I did to Jerusalem. And when I'm done with you, you will listen to me and I will use you. That's what he said. It was crazy. And so now, fast forward, it happened with you what happened. I'm giving God my word that I will serve Him for the rest of my life. And I was still in the business. I was still in the business. You were doing great. There were no issues with you whatsoever. Complete, total, 100% healing. And you have a scar on your belly when the surgeon opened you up. And one day I asked God, I said, "You've healed him perfectly, 100%. He's like brand spanking new, but you've left the scar. And I want to ask you if you can remove it. Can you remove the scar so there will be not even a trace that something like this happened?" And he said, "No, I want you to remember. Every time you look at the scar, I want you to remember about your vow, about your oath, and about how powerful I am, that I can do the impossible, that I am God of the impossible." And he said to me, "Nathaniel, that when you're going to go on with your life, every time you look at the scar, this is going to be a reminder to you what God did for you, that you have a destiny, that there is a purpose for your life, that you are a star baby, that He has saved you for such a time as this, that there is a great thing ahead of you for such a time as this, because of what happened, because of the story, because of the transformation, because of, you know, all the background, the vision, the crucifixion, all those different things that happened. They happened for a purpose, for such a time as this, that we are to remember where we came from. And guess what happened? So you were doing great, business was doing great. I paid the debts, I paid everything. My business was flourishing. I started to build houses, and I started to work with the homeless people part time until 2005. I'm sitting in my fancy office. I'm doing stories on politicians and business people. I'm eating in the best restaurants. Money starts to flow really, really good. Life is good. You're 5 years
So this
old.
is this is 5 years after your promise.
That's right. So I'm changed. I'm not drinking 6 years now. I'm tithing. I'm supporting. I'm doing my best to be good. I'm good to your mom. I don't go crazy. I am supporting the church and the missions. So I'm part time preaching. I'm on the streets once a week. We were called pizza preachers at that time. I partner with other street evangelists. Everything is good, except it was part time, because my whole heart, my energy, everything I was doing was in the business, clients, meetings, business, this job site, that job site, this house, this house. So my focus was 100%. I started the magazine, as you remember, Calgary Living at that time, Edmonton, Vancouver Living, Toronto Living. Um, so magazine was doing good. It was the best new magazine in the province. We were in Bankers Hall, right across from the Mexican consulate. So life is good. Everything is moving in the right direction. I'm serving God, but part time. Everything is part time if it comes to God, and I'm full time businessman. I hire different people, and I'm sitting in my office, and I hear 5 years later, for the first time in 5 years, I hear the same voice that spoke to me after the vision of crucifixion. And he says to me, "Pack your stuff from your office and go out of go in your underwear out of Egypt and do not look back." So pack your stuff from your office and go in your underwear. What that means for the Polish man, because I have to explain, some people, English people, do not understand what I'm saying. He didn't tell me strip naked and walk out of the office. For a Polish mind that grew up behind the Iron Curtain, in your underwear means with nothing, no wealth, no strength, no power, no money. Leave everything behind and walk as you stand. That's what it means, in your underwear, and do not look back at Egypt. That's what he said to me. And sometimes I have to keep reminding myself about this. Do not look back at Egypt, because Egypt lures you, sucks you in, especially in a business. And it kind of has that power because in Egypt, spiritually speaking, everything is nicer. The power, the wealth, the fun, the drinking, the women, all those different things are very alluring to a fleshly mind. And he says, don't look back at Egypt. And I remember thinking, is this your Lord? But of course, I knew because I remember the voice. I remember the voice. I knew it was God. But I hired a designer, a graphic designer for the magazine. She was the one that was putting the pictures and everything, the graphic for the magazine together. She is a born again believer, a friend of mine. So I said to her, listen, God just spoke to me. Can you pray with me if this is really what he wants? Because this is what he said to me. And I told her, and we prayed. And after we were done praying, she looked at me. She says, I truly believe God wants you to leave the business and just walk. So I remember I took her for a dinner as a thank you because I said to her, if that's the case, you're going to lose your job. And she says, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. And we went for dinner, and and that was the last time I ever went back to business or to my office or anything else. I've lost millions of dollars. I've lost shares. I've lost properties, and I never went back. Instead, I went full force to save lives. And as you remember, 2005, just a few months after I walked out of my office, out of the business, we took 600 people off the streets. And then we started to get the attacks from the city, the tickets, the craziness, over 300 citations for feeding the homeless. Um, and even though at last podcast I was sharing about how the media viewed us, we were the heroes, we were the good guys. They were writing stories. A businessman leaves business and you know goes and helps the poor and saves lives. And it was a great story, and they loved us until the politicians got involved. And last time during the part one, I was sharing with you how naive of a Christian I was. I thought that the government actually wants to save lives, not to kill. I thought that the shelters are actually working to get rid of homelessness. Then I learned that they are part of the problem. They want to keep it going. I thought that the jail system is to rehabilitate, to
Rehabilitate.
rehabilitate people, but they actually want the revolving door to they want them to keep coming. I was shocked to learn that the homeless people are hooked on drugs, and the drug dealer was the supervisor in drop-in center. So he had 1,000 clients every day, and I have become a target. I have become a threat to the enterprise. That's why they put a price on my head, $5,000 for for me to be killed. I had knives thrown at me, pistols, stones. I was attacked
So
multiple.
on that note, actually, next episode, I have an idea to kind of split it into half. So half the time I want to talk about war stories, which involve some of those fascinating stories. And I think it's important to talk about them. I was listening to a message. I think it may have been Billy Graham, an old message, and he or this preacher said that it's very important to recall what God has done in your life because you need to keep reminding yourself that, especially in the times where you don't feel his presence as much, but you remember, oh, you did this for me. That was an amazing thing that he did. So I want to recall some of those stories. I mean, for example, you deciding to play Silas and Paul in prison, and you decided to sing, things like that. And then you got kicked out of jail. You actually got kicked out of jail for singing, things like that. There's many, many war stories that I want to explain to people because it's important to remember the things that God has done and those amazing, amazing stories. They're very impactful and inspiring. So I want to talk about that next time. And then we can talk about some biblical things, some current things, and we'll keep that for next time. If you, a listener, are listening and you have any ideas or want to suggest what we could talk about for future episodes, please comment. Let us know what you think we should talk about. and we'll read the comments, and if we think that it's a great idea, we can talk about it. So I wanted these first two episodes to be explaining who you are, and it's such a long story. We had to split it into two episodes, and we've already missed so much because there's just too much to talk about. But this gives people a little bit of an idea of your life story, why you're doing what you're doing, what you grew up under, what you went to in Greece, in business, in smuggling, in communism, and in Canada, and then your testimony, because that's really what changed you from the former to what you are now. So I wanted people to hear this story from you, and and people need to understand that it's not you that did this. It's God using you. You're just like a nobody. No offense. We're all nobodies. We're just people. We're ants. God looks at us as these little, we're dust, and to dust we shall return. But God using you and creating this amazing story, this powerful testimony, this inspiring story is what we want to give to people, to encourage people. And what they can take away from this is that God is real. He's here today. He's working. He is not a story of history. He's not some myth or legend or story that we read about who did these amazing things, who's just silent today. He actively does things today, and you have to make that decision to walk with God or to not. And what your story shows is that there's misery in every way, everywhere you go, whether it's communism, capitalism, richness, poorness, alcoholism, or whatever it is, drugs, alcohol, nothing makes you happy. It's always misery. The only happiness is when you are saved and through Jesus Christ. So,
Yeah,
uh,
I want to add something. The Bible says that when you have been forgiven much, you love much. I think the West is weak and shallow because the West is not recognizing this, that God, what Jesus did on the cross. And a person like me might seem radical and hard and, just come on, can you just compromise here and there? But how can you? When you have been given the things that our family received, the responsibility, the visions, the miracles. And I mean, you're not the only miracle. I mean, if I would just start telling the people about the times my life was saved, including being pushed from 45 feet high by by a crane on the steel sticking out and other things, we have, and the things I have done and the horrible things that I have done, we have been given so much. We have been forgiven a lot. We have been blessed with miracles, signs, and wonders and healings in our family. My brother David being rescued from the hospital and completely changed. And Gabriel, the miscarriage that Majana had with Gabriel, and yet God spared his life. So many things that God has done. And the stubbornness comes from this realization that we're just passing through. From dust we came, into dust we shall return. And the only thing that actually matters is what we have done for the kingdom of God on this side of eternity. We're going to spend eternity with what we have done. The book of Acts continues, it never ended. That's the only book in the Bible that has no ending, because God wants us to keep writing another chapters, another stories. And when you look back and you understand that God is so merciful, so loving, so amazing, how can you compromise? How can, think about it, Nathaniel, you life or $1 billion? Let's just play this for a few minutes. If someone would put $1 billion on the table and say, Nathaniel or $1 billion, there's not even a question. It's not even a thought that would cross the mind. Keep your money. I'm keeping my son. But that's just what God did. He gave me you, and I gave him a promise without even knowing if he's going to give me you. How can I break that owed right now? How can I break it and sell it for $2 million? The city of Calgary offered me $2 million to give up Jesus. Seriously? Seriously? They gave me an offer of sitting at the legislature, becoming an MLA, if I would just shut my mouth. Seriously? Obviously, you don't understand what happened in a Pavlovsky's, family. You don't understand.
And that's what I think a lot of people that have come and gone, or people that maybe watch and criticize. I love this quote by, I think it's Theodore Roosevelt, that it's easy to criticize when you're not the man in the arena, but when you're the man in the arena, you're the one that actually has to do things. The criticism does not matter to you because you're the one that's in the arena actually doing things. And I think a lot of these critics or people that look and watch and have really no idea what they're talking about, they don't understand that you don't get your directives from people, or from people that are donating, or from people that are coming to church, or politicians, or police, or whoever it is. It's irrelevant because your directives come from God. And that's exactly what Peter, and then later all the apostles had to come to the realization to. And they said, and you see that in Acts chapter 4 and 5, is the directives of man don't matter. When you have a directive of God, that supersedes everything else. And their criticisms or their misunderstandings are irrelevant. When you have a testimony like this, or any testimony, and God is telling you to do something, you do that. It doesn't matter what the critics say.
And it
They're
doesn't, it sometimes it's not easy thing to do. When he tells you to do something, your mind screams, no way, this is crazy. When you know to do the right thing, but the flow of the people, the masses, if you will, go direct, opposite direction, your body, your flesh says, this is not good, you're going to hurt. It's easier to go with the flow than to swim against the tide or against the current, because not many people are willing to face those things. But someone famous said that if you don't want to be criticized, do nothing, say nothing, be nothing. So, but I would add to this, if you choose that path, the criticism you're going to hear will come from God. That ultimately you cannot avoid being criticized. So I prefer to be criticized by people than to hear from God, you missed the boat, my son. I had so much more for you, so much more. I created you for such a time as this. I healed, I spared your life. I healed your son. I took you from the land of slavery, land of communism, to the land of freedom for a purpose, for a reason. There is a destiny, and you've missed it. You blew it because you thought it was too hard. You thought it was too crazy. Well, history is written by people that have done extraordinary things. And we have a choice, Nathaniel. In the end of the day, do you want to be part of the cloud of witnesses that did those extraordinary things or not? I mean, you don't have to. God is not forcing you. He's not going to take you to heaven kicking and screaming, I don't want to go. You don't want to go, don't go. You will not go. He's not forcing you to do something. You see, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, God did not come and say, don't you dare, bowing. They had a choice, and they could bow and they could die. They
and
knew,
the rest of Israel did bow.
right? Actually, the nations, it says about not just a nation, nations. Just like we saw during the craziness of the 5 years, nations did bow, but there are certain people that refuse to bow. I want to be that certain people. The Bible calls us peculiar people. We're different. We're supposed to be different. If you look like the world, you smell like the world, you talk like the world, well, then you are the world.
There's
You
a
are.
there's a saying there's a saying that goes like, if your friends say, "Oh, you're a Christian? I didn't know that." Then you're clearly failing.
Yeah.
Everyone should know that.
Of course. I mean, we have nothing to hide. We have nothing to be ashamed of. We're not submarine Christians that pop up on Sunday and then go deep waters on Monday. We should be visible. Again, is your God that you're serving worth it? What did He do for you? Do you even realize what He has done? Do you even have an understanding that He died for you on in the most horrible way on the cross, the most painful, the most horrible way to be tortured. He did this for you. And the Bible says, when we were his enemies, he died for us. Not when we were his friends, when we were his enemies, he died for us. So when you start to understand what the mighty things the Lord has done for you, you cannot be silenced. You cannot be pushed around and subdued. No, I refuse to be subdued by Satan. I refuse to be subdued by the uncircumcised Philistines. My God is bigger than all of them combined together. And sometimes, yes, they are too powerful for me, but that's a good moment. That's a good place for every Christian to realize, with God, without God, I'm finished. I'm nothing. With God, my enemies are finished, are nothing. That's the perspective. I think in the West, we've lost the perspective. Again, we're going back to the beginning. Most do not know how powerful, how amazing and mighty our God is. And they do not know who they are in God, that they are the chosen ones. He calls us priests and kings. For such a time as this, we are the sons and the daughters of the Most High God, born for a purpose, for a destiny. And Jesus didn't say, stay. He says, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. We received clear instructions. We are to go and we are to do things. And it's funny in a way that, Nathaniel, all of my troubles are for the things that God is commanding us to do. Feed the poor, take care of the orphans and the widows, preach the gospel, tell people about me, all the things, or keep the church's doors open. I mean, seriously, in the history of the church, this never ever happened. Even during the bubonic plague and all the craziness of the Middle Ages and the Nazi Germany and Soviet Union, all those things, never once the global church did chose to shut the doors. No way. It never happened until the past few years. So we have a choice in the end of the day. And I think you have a very valid point. We must keep reminding ourselves about the mighty things that the Lord has done for us. We must remember. We must
That's
remember.
why that's why it was commanded to the Israelites to every single year remember exactly what God did, and that was commanded for all time. Certain festivals like the Passover, God said, do this for all time to remember what I did for you. And that's why we have certain holidays. They're called holy days. It's so that we remember. We remember Easter, we remember the Passion, we remember the birth of Jesus. We're supposed to remember those things, and how much more we should even remember those things in our own life, because that's what makes us. That's Jesus did something for all of us, and we have to remember that. So next time I do want to talk about some of those things. I think we can split it into some fascinating war stories and then other things. I still want to, this next episode will be the last episode where we're talking about kind of who you are, what you've been doing, because I also want to talk about some of the missions work that you did, that some of which I was a part of in Africa, the Middle East, and all over Central America and Europe and many places. And I want to talk about those things, talk about some of those fascinating things that you've seen, done, the miracles that we witnessed. And I want people to understand that this is now the calling that God has placed on you, has put you in to go and do, not just to sit in church and to, sing hallelujah, which is a great thing to do, but that is not all we're supposed to do. We're commanded to go out into the world and actually make a difference, to preach the gospel to all creation, and to go and go feed. There's straight commandments: go and feed the homeless, go and take care of the prisoners, go and take care of the widows and the orphans. Those are commandments. And when you actually do those things in practice, you see the work of the Holy Spirit. And we can talk about that next time. And hopefully these episodes won't be so long. Hopefully they're not boring people. And after that, I want to spend some time in subsequent episodes where we can talk about the Bible, history, politics. I think a very important topic that people need to understand is slave mentalities. I read a book about a doctor who survived Auschwitz-Birkenau, the concentration camp. Another book about a man who was tortured for Christ in Siberia. And we need to understand the slave mentality and how people, Stockholm syndrome, and how people can get attached to Egypt. And you mentioned that earlier. You were talking about how you have to leave Egypt behind. And I don't think we've been doing that as a church, as Christians, definitely not as nations. We have
because
not
it's
left.
because it's easier, Nathaniel, to take people out of Egypt than to take Egypt out of people.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I was reading this book about it's called Man's Search for Meaning, and it was a survivor of Auschwitz, and he was talking about how after the camps, these people were still damaged. These people were horrendously damaged, and not physically. Physically, they recovered, but psychologically, you could not take away that feeling, that slavery, that depression, that feeling of still being under a slave camp mentality. And the same thing with the gulags in Siberia. Same thing with actual Egypt. We read that in the Bible. A whole generation had to die in the desert because God could not use these people because they were just so entrapped in their slavery. They could not be. He could not even remove because they were not willing to have the slavery removed out of them. And I think that's an important topic for Canadians and Americans to understand. Americans, at least like Polish people, they fought for their freedom, and they can understand the value of it. Canadians are in more grave danger, I think, than they realize, because they have not taken off that slave mentality. And many people, Indigenous people and African Americans, they need to understand that we've been called out of slavery, and that entitles a mentality shift. So, and I know you've studied this, you've studied history, so I think we can have a great conversation about this in later episodes. And again, if people want to recommend topics for us to talk about, please comment, get involved. And if people want to read the entire story of what's been going on in your life, what's been going on recently, the arrests and everything that's been going on, you can read the book, Lions Do Not Bow. It's on Amazon. It's on pathwaybookservices.com. And you can read about all the details of being imprisoned by a government for the faith. This is happening today in Canada. A man was imprisoned, arrested, dragged through the courts for the faith. And if you don't believe us, you can read the book. You can watch the documentary Street Advocate on YouTube and read the book Lions Do Not Bow. And any last thoughts?
Well, you cannot set the captives free if you yourself are a slave. So I think that's a great topic for people to understand, that in order to be successful and help others, you have to yourself be free first. And I think the enemy has done a very good job of enslaving the churchgoers, thinking that they are fine, that they're okay. But
And that's why sometimes for example, like yourself, ex-alcoholics are sometimes the best people to pull other people out of their alcoholism, because they dealt with it and they got out of it. And as Christians, that's not us that do anything. It's the Holy Spirit. It's Jesus setting us free. But it's often those people that have gone through those things who've actually been in slavery, and you were in slavery in the physical sense, as in communism, but also the spiritual sense. And you were a slave all throughout your life in Poland under communism, and then capitalism in Greece, and then your life in Canada. And all of that, you were a slave until Jesus set you free. And now you can pull other people out of slavery. And that's what we hope every listener can do. And that's how Christianity has spread. That's oddly enough, it's been through persecution. Again, that's another topic we can talk about a different time. It's persecution that spread the gospel. It's a paradox that's just absolutely fascinating. In the Canadian government's attempt to silence you and beat you, they created you into the man that you are today. And again, it's irony, and it's a paradox, because they turned you into you. It was their attempt, it's their persecution that gave you a global platform. It's their persecution. And this happens with Christians all the time. There's a famous saying, it's Christianity is like a nail. The harder you hit it, the deeper it goes. And just totalitarian governments and governments just don't understand, because their hatred for God is so strong. Their goal is to replace God, and they're blinded by it. The devil, it can be so foolish because he's blinded by hatred, and they make mistakes when they're blinded by hatred. And it's a fascinating paradox.
Yeah, it is. It is. They are hoping that you quit. So the only way the enemy can win is when you throw a towel at the ring. You must keep fighting no matter what is being thrown at you. As long as you are in the arena, as long as you're in the ring, you have a guarantee of victory. You just have to endure the season of the valley, even if it is a valley of shadow of death, because then God says that He will be there with you. So we got to keep plowing, keep enduring, keep doing what we are doing. The Bible says that by the blood of the Lamb. So if you're a born again believer, you have the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony. That's why the testimony is so powerful and it's needed. We all should share our testimonies everywhere we go, because it's a pure power. It's something that the enemy cannot take it away from you. It's your story. It happened to you. You just have to share it. And when you do, the truth of that testimony will set the captives free.
So, last point, as many people are aware, you were robbed, actually taken. The government took away and robbed you of your charitable tax status for speaking about biblical moral things, such as, and they listed these exactly verbatim: homosexuality, abortion, and divorce, because you spoke negatively on those things. They said specifically that you talked about those three sins negatively, that because of that, you are not eligible for a tax status because you're too political. Of course, we all know that those are moral issues, not political issues. Those are moral issues that are talked about in the Bible specifically. So, murder, homosexuality, and divorce are talked about as moral issues in the Bible. They are sins, and you had your tax status revoked. So you
2008.
entirely, in 2008. So this was long before you even thought about engaging the political realm. You were still just getting out of being a pizza preacher. That was when you just started doing barbecues on the streets, and you were still just starting street church. So you were 3 years into that, and barely starting off, and they already decided to do that. So if people could help out, we entirely rely well, first on God, but God uses people. And all that you do, all that this ministry does, all that the volunteers do, is by the grace of God and by generosity of people. And three times a week, you are sometimes in minus 40 degrees, whether it's raining, snowing, blizzarding, or plus 35 degrees Celsius or minus 35 degrees Celsius. Doesn't matter. You're 3 times a week feeding the homeless people, preaching the gospel, and twice a week in a building doing a church. Of course, so many other things, missions and endeavors that just never cease to end. So if people could help out, and again, please get involved in however you feel called to do, whether that's prayer or donating or getting actually physically involved. You can go to the website streetchurch.ca to help out. There are many ways to help, and you can contact my dad directly. His number, his email is public. You can talk to him directly, and we'll see you next time. Any last thoughts?
God bless, stay strong, and lions, remember, do not bow before the hyenas.